loving. We're going to have a good time. So here we
Yay!
go.
Welcome, guys. We are back. Sorry about last week. I just didn't feel well. I didn't get things out in time, and yeah, Jenny was just like, "When you feel better." So we're back this week.
You're allowed to be sick. You're allowed to not feel well. So
Right. I mean, I am healing from surgery, so it does make sense why I've been out. And I had found out last week that really my surgeon I saw last Friday, and she'd extended it another month, and was just like, "You're so far behind, you just need to take it easy." So that's why I started putting out last week that I was just going to hold off on my audio rooms until August and try and do the 2 live shows a week and build
yeah.
that energy back gradually. But this is too important. You and I have talked about this at length. This is a topic that we have to talk about, that we must discuss because of, honestly, the rhetoric that's spread around it, the polarization and division that we have right now going on in our society, the hate that's coming from that, the violence that's coming from that.
Yeah.
And so that was really, I had put together several topics before Jenny and I kind of took a break when I went out for surgery. And we didn't have a chance to pre-record anything because I was just slowly sliding downhill and just I was tapped out. So we're now trying to kind of catch up back with some of those topics that we had. And tonight, I understand, could be a very, I think some people could be very pushed off by these comments that are the subject that we're talking about tonight, because we are talking about the Bible. We're talking about the King James Version. And again, hidden narratives and modern challenges. So we're taking a comparison of the history, some history within the Bible, and then we're kind of comparing that to what is going on in Jenny's state of Oklahoma and my state of North Carolina as examples of some of this. And Jeffrey is the first to arrive.
Hello, Jeffrey. Jeffrey's joining us from LinkedIn. Amber's on LinkedIn. She would be here with me on TikTok. To those of you out in LinkedIn country, I am recording this also, or I'm going live on my phone on TikTok also, because Amber does not quite have the following built up. So please go follow Moonchild. Is it?
Yes, please.
Yes.
It's Moonchild 77. Let me go back and take this banner off so that they can see that.
Then we can do this in a much different way rather than having to do it like this. But in the meantime, we're doing it like this. And the reason we're doing it like this, the reason we're talking about the Bible, is because in the state I'm in, Ryan Walters, our education, our head of education.
Superintendent.
Thank you. The words don't come. And I used to be a teacher, has now decided that teachers need to incorporate the Bible into all of their teaching. Subject matter somehow. I don't really understand all the details of it. Everything I've seen is, I still don't understand. Is it a thing where teachers are just kind of like using it, like as if you were going to do maybe an English lesson, for example? I taught English, and you might do a compare and contrast. Would you pull up different verses to compare and contrast? How would that look? We don't really know. What we do know is he's insisted that the Bible be in the classroom in some way and related to instruction. And I don't know how anybody feels about that. I really don't care about how anybody feels like that. I personally feel some kind of way about that. I'm not a Christian. My kids aren't Christian. And I do not object to anybody else being Christian and going to church and reading your Bible and loving your God. I love that for you. Hallelujah. But, that's just such a violation of what the spirit of the First Amendment is. And it is pushing one religion. It is not pushing all. It is not teaching about all religions. We do have that class in high school. And, I learned some of that in my English and literature class, like how literature and things have been impacted by religion, stuff like that. But then to directly insist that one specific religious text be taught in public school is just, no.
It's just, it's abysmal. That's the only word I can use for it. Let's see, what did AP say here? I don't mind religion being taught in an academic context, but in a conversion context, that's an issue. Yes. And that's kind of what we're talking about. There are over 243 religions practiced in the U.S. alone. And this is a superintendent who, quite frankly, is trying to push that an entire state. And actually, we have politicians across the country who are trying to say that the entire country was founded on Christian nationalism, and it wasn't. We escaped a monarchy so that we could establish our own religion or if we wanted a religion. That was adamant. We will go into several pieces of historical context that I pulled up because I wanted everybody to know that I'm not pulling up from. There is a documentary that I watched, and some of that documentary, again, probably has some persuasion to it, but I also pulled up lots of facts because I wanted this to be fact-based. I don't want y'all to think that we're coming in here with our opinions and trying to sway you in some direction. I just want you to know the truth.
Right.
And we have a lot of politicians on either side, that are willing to twist the truth to get you to believe in what they say. And really part of, and I know Jenny had to do this with her education degree, I had to do this with my nursing degree, was being able to decipher information and realize what was evidence-based and what was subjective. There are two very big differences. And right now our country is kind of blurring the lines. Yes, AP. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, deists, want to say something. They weren't the only ones. They weren't the only two. Most of our founders were deists. They were not Christians. They did not believe in the church. They actually were worried that it had been manipulated through the hands of men. And so that brings us to the very first topic. Let's go into the King James Bible. King James Version. So first of all, I'm going to read y'all a piece about King James. So King James the First, formerly known as King James of England and King James the Sixth of Scotland, is often considered to have been bisexual. He had a passionate relationship with his wife Queen Anne, but he also had many male lovers. Chief among them was George Villiers, Earl and later Duke of Buckingham. His letters portray physical relationships between him and various men, including Villiers. Even though James publicly denounced the act of sodomy, it suggested that he might have engaged in such relationships. These relationships were not just personal, but also political. Villiers, for instance, rose to become the Duke of Buckingham, indicating the influence he wielded at court. These relationships allowed King James I to navigate the complex political landscape, playing off Protestant and Roman Catholic factions of Scottish nobles against each other. This helped him rule Scotland almost as absolutely as Elizabeth I ruled England. King James I made several notable changes to the Bible. Particularly in the New Testament, he ordered that the word Christ be replaced with Messiah throughout the text. He also changed the spelling of many names to make them more accurate. In addition, he added several new books to the Bible, including the books of Esther and Nehemiah. These changes were part of his effort to create a translation of the Bible that would be acceptable to all Christians in England. The implications of these alterations were significant. The King James Bible, published in 1611, became one of the most printed books ever and had a profound impact on the English language. However, it's worth noting that these changes also reflected the king's personal beliefs and his own interpretations of the word, which may not have been shared by all Christians of his time. Yeah,
So
gasp, sodomy. What?
I said, so it worked. So his plan worked.
Yes.
Made some changes and boom. Okay. All right.
Right. Okay. So George and Mary, let's go a little bit more into George. And this is George Villiers is considered one of his most beloved. There are some letters he actually refers to him as his wife. The King James refers to him as his wife. Villiers, okay, so George and Mary is a documentary that's on Starz right now. It's a historical documentary, and we'll go into the name of the book in a second because I do have that listed here. But the historical documentary, George and Mary, provides a deep dive into the life of King James and his relationships. The documentary dramatizes the Villiers family, scandalous rise to power at the court of England's James I. It explores the relationship between King James and George Villiers, who was a favorite of the king. This series presents the two men as lovers, whose liaisons were engineered by George's mother, Mary, as part of her quest to gain power, because women had no place.
Okay.
The revelations made in George and Mary provide a fascinating look into the life of King James and his court. They highlight the complex dynamics of power, sexuality, and religion during his reign, offering a fresh perspective. His mother eventually was risen to the she got also like a title out of all of this. And so they just kept he went from being not quite I wouldn't say a handmaiden to King James, but he went from that to from Earl to dukedom in 9 years.
Okay.
And his mother got position and power because of his relationship with King James as well. So this was
Okay.
her only way to obtain power. And that's what the dynamic of George and Mary are in this series, is
Okay.
saying that, again, they were kind of exposing he had lots of relationships. And
Okay.
here you've got someone who rewrote the Christian Bible, that a lot of people still go by the King James Version today.
Yep.
And he changed it to manipulate his, not his congregation, but his state, his country, to say this is how we should believe based on his own personal interpretations. Now, he was also living an opposite lifestyle of what was being preached, and yet still expecting his people to live by a certain different set of standards.
Why does
So,
it sound familiar?
what is that? What is that word that I'm looking for? Hypocrisy. That's the word. Hypocrisy. But I thought the word of God was unaltered. Only if he wrote it, AP.
Right.
And that's all I'm going to say about that.
I'm almost certain there's like a part in the Bible that says anybody who adds to this or takes away from it is like, no, it's bad.
Right? Right?
So.
Hashtag telephone. AP, yeah. Like, and that's another part. Like, understanding when these books are written, if they're written centuries after the events that happened, what exactly were the facts? Because all you're doing is passing down a story to another story, and we know how telephone works. You pass it around 30 students, and the story, the first sentence you rolled out at the back of the classroom, is completely different at the front from 30 kids. And you're talking about years, centuries? No.
Rosemary.
Okay, so this brings up the next section that actually AP kind of talked about when he first came in the room, which was separation of church and state. The principle of the separation of church and state is a cornerstone of the United States Constitution, specifically enshrined as the First Amendment. The phrase separation of church and state is a paraphrase from Thomas Jefferson and has been used to express the understanding of the intent and function of the Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. This principle is generally traced to January 1st, 1802, in a letter by Jefferson addressed to the Danbury Baptist Associates in Connecticut and published in a Massachusetts newspaper. In it, Jefferson declared that when the American people adopted the Establishment Clause, they built a wall of separation between the church and state. However, the church of separation and state in the U.S. is currently being challenged by political theatrics. For instance, officials in red states are increasingly using schools to test the wall between church and state.
Right.
Oklahoma's Superintendent of Education joined Louisiana in insisting that biblical teachings have a place in schools. These efforts include Bible literacy bills proposed in some state legislatures, a new Louisiana law that requires public schools to display the Ten Commandments, and a new Florida law that allows public schools to hire religious chaplains for counseling students. All of these bills have faced legal challenges from advocacy groups that claim the legislative violates the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. These developments highlight the ongoing debate and tensions surrounding the principle of the separation of church and state in the U.S. So just going into the separation of church and state, like this is something that we have heard of for years. When I was growing up, I think the biggest stories were like the biggest thing around church and state I think I can remember was I think they might have been praying still with teams before games, and like that became a big thing. They said, no, you can't do it. If this is on school property and doing school hours, official school function, you could not pray.
So I think
unless you were like a private school, like a public school, no.
The thing is, anybody can pray at any time, anywhere they want. The
Right.
idea is not to make it compulsory, not to sanction it, not to say, hey, everyone has to pray. And also for those who, opt not to not, come back on them in any way if
Right.
they choose not to. And so, this idea, I taught for 10 years, and this idea that, God's been taken out of the schools. I had lots of students who prayed. I had students who prayed, who asked me to pray with them. And I would do that for them if they were in a moment of hurting, because I care about my students. There's no reason any person can't pray anywhere, anytime they want to. And I think that if that is calming and healing and does something for you, then you should do that, especially, kids. when they're in that moment, if they rely on their higher power, I think that's lovely. There's nothing wrong with that. But it should never be forced or even implied that my child should or has
Right.
to, or there's something wrong with her if she doesn't at her school. That's what shouldn't
Right.
be on the table, because any Christian wouldn't want there to suddenly be an imposition of a different religion or a different religious text upon their kids, or a different kind of prayer. If people started rolling out mats and, facing Mecca, my God, people would have an utter attack.
Right.
And so it really just comes down to that belongs in the church where it belongs. And it doesn't belong in classrooms. Classrooms are not for, that's not what instruction is. It's about.
I mean, if you're going to a private school, do what you want to do. But we're talking about public schools, and I'm 100% with Jenny. Like, again, if we're saying that there are 243 religions, imagine how many children you could be insulting in that classroom by saying you have to pray to God. And these particular states, those particular instances, are flat out saying that this is the one and only, that's it. You're not leaving room for people to have their own choice. And that was exactly what the Establishment Clause was that we got our own choice. We created that because we ran from a monarchy that was trying to force us into what we should believe. That's why we came to the Americas in the first place, guys. We were running from religious persecution. And now you want to say this is what we were actually created on? Give me a break. No. It just doesn't fly. And AP, the bills sound alarming for me, especially since the people who are gung-ho on them aren't the folks that follow the Bible, like living a Christian, taking care of the poor, caring for the needy, seeking wealth and status and fame. But whoops, no. We'll get into that. In fact, historical amnesia, illiteracy.
Yeah,
exactly. Chorito.
Somebody asked me yesterday, well, hey, Walters has got to know this is all going to come down on him via the ACLU. It opened up a huge door for like the Satanic Temple to come in and sanction, other spiritual time for students in the school. So they said, he had to have known he was going to come up against this. Absolutely had to. He's not an idiot. And the people that work for him, I mean, I may have opinions about him and what kind of character he has, but I don't think he's a stupid person. And he's got people, that work for him, and he's got legal teams, and he has things like that. So knowing this was going to come down the pike, knowing that it was not going to fly and that the ACLU was going to jump on it, what was his motivation for doing it? And I'm so stumped by that. It's easy to go, oh, well, there's got to be some kind of monetary thing to it, power, obviously. But even Ryan Walters, people who knew Ryan Walters in the past have said, this is not how he is. That he is very different publicly, and now that he's got this platform to do this, but that's not how he really ever was or lived. I guess maybe that he was.
I was going to say, I heard former students who were just like this when he was a teacher. This was not the guy he was. Like, we felt safe in his classroom.
Right. So where was was there a shift? Does he really, really believe all this and feel all this, or is there an agenda behind it? And I would say, I think my biggest piece on Walters is the fact that the directive that he gave was that Bibles should be in and taught within classrooms from grades 5th through 12th, right? Yeah. And that came the day after SCOTUS ruled. Actually, I don't know if it was SCOTUS or if it was Oklahoma Supreme Court, but two Supreme Courts said, no, publicly funded dollars will not go to a religious institution. And they were trying to fund a private Catholic school with public funds. And when that came down the next day, his gut knee-jerk reaction was, we're teaching the Bibles in all classrooms. Yeah. This is the same week that Louisiana came out and said, we're going to post the 10 Commandments in every single classroom. By the way, to post the 10 Commandments in their original version, you'd have to post them in something that's not English. You're right, Sin. Somebody here on TikTok mentioned the movie Bad Faith, the show Bad Faith. I have not watched this yet.
Yes.
I've been having a million things going on. It is absolutely on my list of things to watch very soon, but I've definitely heard that we need to be checking that out. We need to be on top of things like Project 2025, which potentially has been like
we're about to go into that.
Keep that in mind. I don't care that you don't care. You're here. Goodbye. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
All right. So Walters, this is what I had pulled up between the research on Walters. In Oklahoma, State Superintendent Ryan Walters, a fervent advocate for integrating conservative Christian values into public education, has been under fire for his actions and rhetoric against the LGBTQ community. He recently issued a directive mandating the incorporation of the Bible into classroom lessons for grades 5 through 12, arguing that the Bible is an indispensable historical and cultural touchstone and the students must grasp the foundational principles of the United States. However, critics argue that Walters' actions are a sign of Christian nationalism, a political ideology that seeks to merge Christian and American identities. The ideology asserts that the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation and should continue to be governed by Christian principles. Walters has stood by policies affecting the trans community in state schools, which have resulted in increasing calls for his removal from office. He has been quoted saying, "We're not going to lie to students. We're not going to push a gender ideology." We covered earlier in this year that his rhetoric can be absolutely tied to what happened to Next Benedict.
Yeah.
An open letter signed by about 350 local, state, and national organizations accused Walter of fostering a culture of violence and hate against the 2 SLGBTQI+ community in Oklahoma schools and demands an investigation to the State Department of Education. Furthermore, Walters has proposed rules banning diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in state schools. He has also restricted the behavior of teachers outside of the classroom, calling for the ouster of an elementary school principal who performed as a drag queen during his personal time. In addition to these actions, Walter has brought in controversial organizations to influence education in Oklahoma. He has hired Moms for Liberty, a Florida-based conservative group designated as an extremist group by the Southern Poverty Law Center for library media. The group has been accused of allegedly harassing community members, advancing anti-LGBTQ misinformation, and fighting to scrub diverse and inclusive material from lesson plans. Walter has also brought in the head of the Heritage Foundation, a group criticized, that was this week, a group criticized for its conservative views and policies to rewrite their social studies curriculum, who are also behind Project 2025.
Oh God, I was off, but it's the same. Yes, but also apparently now PragerU is being incorporated into our social studies curriculum.
Yes, that too.
That said that slavery was actually beneficial to Black people. By the way, I do not believe that, not for 1 second. I'm only repeating what I know that to be.
No. Let's see. I don't agree with that statement, actually, in terms of the impact of the Bible in the West. However, the second piece of that, I still revert to academic context of teaching religion. And when teaching Paradise Lost, explaining the biblical references. Exactly. Hey, folks, this sounds familiar. 2025? Yeah. No, it is. This is Project 2025. Let's see. In addition, okay, so that was that piece. These actions, including the prohibition of altering sex or gender designations in student records and the appointments of anti-LGBTQ figures to influential positions, have created an environment that many advocates argue is hostile to LGBTQ+, Indigenous, and Two-Spirited students. The presence of supportive and affirming teachers, including those who share students' LGBTQ identities, means LGBTQ students are more likely to attend school, have higher self-esteem, and achieve better academic outcomes. Therefore, the weaponization of religion in schools undermines these supportive environments and perpetuates harm to our communities. These actions and statements by Walters have raised serious concerns about his views and his ability to represent all constituents fairly and without prejudice. And yes, as I told y'all, this is Jenny's state. So I'm gonna let her kind of take over on this little piece. But that was just a little bit that I came up with on Walters, trying to hammer it all together. And y'all can check the resources in the comments because there's about 7, I think, linked to him alone. But it's horrible. What he says is horrible. Who he's brought in is horrible. These people aren't based in education. They're based in political ideologies.
Absolutely.
or religious ideologies, or both.
Which only exist to control people and to try to create that just trying to create an environment that is wanted by a certain party and a certain agenda, and trying to fit everyone in that box, and people just don't, and they're not going to, and that's okay.
Right.
Bye.
Yes, AP. It's almost as if you don't bully a marginalized group, the mental health of said group fares better. Who would have thought? Right? Right? I'm with you. I'm with you. Um, and Walters, he's been making a name for himself for at least the last year or two, at least. Um, and honestly, like, I believe because my stepdad is a teacher and he is in some of these international or national groups, teaching groups, and he's actually spoken with a few teachers within that county, within your county. Or actually, I don't know if they were within your county. I know they're in Oklahoma, though. And they were specifically talking about the mandates that Walters has set down and what they were going to do. And they were kind of like, I'm sorry, nothing's been passed in our legislation that says I have to teach that. He can mandate all he wants to, but it doesn't mean I have to do crap until my school board says I have to do something. So I think that's a way that certain individual schools, certain individual counties are trying in their own way to keep from having to enforce this. But we have a lot of what I call blowhards who are really trying to stoke violence. They're trying to stoke hatred. They're stoking division. And this particular topic affects kids. We're not talking about adults. We're talking about children. So we now, quite frankly, and we talked about this with Next, you have sanctioned hatred and discrimination by the state.
Yeah.
On students. Like, when are we going to stop weaponizing hate against our kids?
Children.
Of all ages. It doesn't matter. And yeah, like this topic, like I said, we had already decided we were going to do this topic a while back, but given that he just handed this down and just added the Heritage Foundation's president of Project 2025 that everybody's suddenly trying to get away from after they've been yelling about it for 3 years, I felt like we needed to speak a little bit to that this is all part of a larger agenda to take over our schools and the education of our children. Absolutely. Changing history to what you want. I mean, that is trying to tell us we all have to believe in a certain religion and what religion. And honestly, well, do you want to add anything else about Walters?
I can't read into anybody's mind. I don't know if there's a power agenda here or if there is a financial agenda here. I don't know what else to say about him. I know that I have my letters ready to go for my kids' school. I know that, teachers have been sued in the past. That's the last thing I want to do. I'm a former teacher. Right. I'm not here to make anybody's life harder when they're just trying to do their job. But, I'm going to do what I have to do to, fight this, because it's not appropriate. It's not an appropriate setting. It's not appropriate to indoctrinate kids. If you want to do that in a church building, go do it. But in a public school setting, where public funds go, and you have a diverse classroom, and, nobody would want their kid indoctrinated by a different religion. So this just isn't a fully Christian nation anymore. This is an entire nation full of very diverse people, and people have different religions, and some people have no religion at all. And that should be kept separate outside of a classroom.
There is, just to speak to the religion part, because I grew up in a very religious setting and in the South, guys. So just Bible Belt, religion. And AP, historical revisionism, is something else. It really is. But you have a lot of people that want to believe a certain way. And part of that is because they live in the same communities and they stop their education early and they don't move outside of those vicinities. So they don't have the opportunity to learn and see and to grow, right? Through different experiences because they have the same experience every single day. So they don't have the opportunity to see something through a different vision. So then when somebody like this comes up and says, oh, they're trying to polarize your kids, you have a lot of people who suddenly go, wait, they are? That's not right. So you've got people who don't educate themselves fully, who aren't educated fully, who are then continuing to spread this information. Oh, they're trying to indoctrinate our children. If you put Christianity into our public classrooms, that's indoctrinating our children.
It is.
We're the same way. We don't have a church. Like I grew up very Christian, Southern Free Will Baptist, but I left at like 20 and I made sure that my children, I taught them moral codes, right?
Thank you,
but at the same time, the realization was that
okay, bye.
I struggled a lot because of honestly, guys, the indoctrination I went through through my Southern Baptist upbringing. And I didn't want that on my kids. I wanted them to be able, if they wanted a religion, to choose what they wanted to believe in, and that they could look for their source all on their own. And so I did not give that to my children either. And in some ways, sometimes people are like, well, you don't give them faith, but I tried to give them faith in themselves.
Yeah.
And then to make the best choices for themselves. And again, like whatever you want to practice, that's up to you. Whatever your source is your source. I'm not here to take that or to give that away. If you're Christian, be Christian. I just don't think it's okay to change history to suit what you want. Because the truth is, we were not founded on Christianity.
Right.
We had deist founders who made it very explicit that there was separation of church and state for a reason. Number one, because we were running from it. Yeah, right?
For very good reason. Anything that becomes a theocracy, when you have leaders that can claim, I am somehow the voice for God, then they can tell you to do anything. They can get you to do anything. And there are people who fall for it. I've seen more people. It's astonishing to me how the first commandment is don't worship any gods before me. And I see people worshiping a certain
presidents,
person, just as much as they would, worship any deity. And it's bizarre.
It's really bizarre.
It's really bizarre. And then to claim that somehow the 10 commandments in the classroom are some kind of moral code. The very first commandment is not worshiping any other gods before me. How in the world is that not absolute dogma? That is specifically insisting upon Christianity. So the 10 commandments aren't some kind of moral code. There's lots of other great moral codes out there, and there's great things to say about morality, but that ain't it. That very first one indicates exactly what the rest are going to be about. And it is about a certain religion, and that does not belong in a public school setting.
Right. AP said it's not just that. It's about anti-intellectualism, arrogance. We're ignoring experts, PhDs, etc., in favor of people who get their knowledge from Facebook University or Google. I mean, there is something, like I said at the beginning of the show, Jenny and I both had classes where we learned how to research. What is evidence-based research? What can't be questioned, what can be tested over and over and get the same results. Not somebody's hyperbole or opinion, but fact.
Right.
And that, not to mention various religions share a similar moral code, belief or not, the golden rule. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, AP. I mean, that's how I taught my kids. We're more by the golden rules of, do unto others as you would have done unto you, like, period. Treat people with respect.
It's really to live by. But, do we all do it perfectly? Of course not.
No.
I mean, everybody's a human being. I've got a lot of people on TikTok right now who are irritated with me because the last video I made, I was like, I just don't care about that issue that happened yesterday. Do I care that people died? Absolutely. I mean, I don't want people to. Doesn't mean I wished it on anybody. I'm not happy that happened. I mean, when it was us, mourning the loss of children in their classrooms, Nobody had anything to say. And now you want me to care about, somebody's ear? And I'm sorry that, I don't wish that had happened to people. That's awful. But, I don't know. Lie with the dogs, you're going to get fleas, maybe.
Let's move on to the next person on our list tonight.
Amen.
Because I would say this one goes a little bit further than yours does. And that would be here in my lovely North Carolina, guys. My current lieutenant governor, who is running for governor, Mark Robinson. So let's just go over a little bit of history before we start breaking some of this down. North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who's currently running for governor, has been widely criticized for his anti-LGBTQ+ views. He has made several public statements that have been deemed offensive and harmful to the community. In one instance, he referred to homosexuality and transgenderism as filth during a speech in Ashbury Baptist Church in Seagrove. He has also been quoted saying that transgender rights movement is demonic and full of the Antichrist spirit. By the way, he does not do political rallies for the most part. All of Robinson's speeches are done in church.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Okay. Robinson's comments have sparked outrage among LGBTQ advocacy groups and elected officials, with many calling for his resignation. His remarks have been condemned as hate speech that fuels discrimination and violence against the LGBT community. Despite the backlash, Robinson has stood by his statements, arguing that his comments are being twisted and he does not have anything against the community itself. Really? In another instance, Robinson suggested that transgender women should be arrested if they use women's restrooms. He stated that if a man feels like a woman and wants to use the women's bathroom, they should be arrested. Instead, he suggested they should just find a corner outside somewhere. This stance with his support for politics that restrict bathroom use based on the sex listed on a person's birth certificate. Robinson has also made statements that have been interpreted as endorsing violence. He declared that this was last weekend, folks, in church, that some folks need killing. During a speech, while the context of the statement is not entirely clear, it sparked outrage and condemnation, with critics arguing that such rhetoric can incite violence and discrimination. Here's the total phrase that he said. We now find ourselves struggling with people with evil intent. There was a time when we used to meet evil on the battlefield, and guess what we did to it? We killed it. We didn't quibble about it. We didn't argue about it. We didn't fight about it. We killed it. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, what did we do? We flew to Japan and we killed the Japanese Army and Navy. We didn't even quibble about it. I didn't start the fight. You did. You want to be left alone? You should have left me alone. We didn't argue and capitulate and talk about, well, maybe we shouldn't fight the Nazis that hard. No, they're bad. Kill them. Some liberal somewhere is going to say that sounds awful. Too bad. Get mad at me if you want to say something. Some folks need killing. These comments and actions by Robinson have raised serious concerns about his views and his ability to represent all constituents fairly and without prejudice. Advocacy groups and elected officials have called for his resignation, arguing that his comments fuel discrimination and violence against the LGBT community. He's also said this several times. He's referred to them as wicked. So when you start talking about kill the people that you consider bad and evil and wicked, this is where we start running into this rhetoric where you go, whoa, are you talking about children now? And he has, yes. Oh, yeah. Some folks need killing. Go look at their articles.
Wow.
I've got the resources in my comments. Like, he has been eaten alive this week for it, for those comments and for saying that. And again, this is talking about killing people. Guys, at a pulpit.
Yeah. At the pulpit, at church. At church.
And you want to talk about blurring the line between separation of church and state. This is it. We are like my kid will become a refugee of North Carolina if he becomes governor in November. He's out. I'm not leaving my kid in his damn state.
Right.
It's terrifying. Comments like that they should get you removed from office. But they don't. And this is what we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing with at a national level. If you're in a red state, you are dealing with some level of what Jenny and I are both going through.
Right.
Go pull up Aaron Reed's map on LGBT legislation, on anti-trans legislation, and look at the difference between what is safe for adults and what is safe for kids.
Yeah.
This show is all about freaking kids, guys. I don't care where you're watching this from. It's about holding onto, loving, and supporting our children so they become functional adults. And if this kind of crap is going on within the school system, is being heard from politicians, is being taught in church, what do you think the trans, the LGBT, the non-binary community feel like?
You know, they've been, I think it might have been, no, it wasn't Ryan Walters. Now I can't remember the guy's name and I feel really stupid for it, but someone who referred to after Nex's death, our children's community as filth.
Yeah.
These are children. These are children.
Right? Robinson.
Robinson said it. Robinson said that about Nex. Robinson said that about Nex here.
Because he couldn't believe when people were like outraged. And he was just like, oh, he's wicked. Why does it matter? That is the attitude. And we're supposed to elect people that, honest to God, people, they represent all of us. All of us.
Sure.
Marginalized groups, the LGBT community, every race, every color, every creed. In the U.S., that's what this dream is about.
Right.
Not one certain political party faction. It's not even the whole party. It's a faction of that party who wants to take over the entire country and dictate what all the rest of us believe, do, and how we live. And we just felt like this is, and in fact, next week, guys, next week we're going into Title IX and SCOTUS.
Fun.
So get ready. I'm tired of, AP. I thought we were like, save these children.
Yeah.
That's what it's supposed to be.
It feels like save certain children,
right?
Rather than
save the children.
There's just humanity in it.
You think about Wicked. When you think about Wicked in a Christian context, that rhetoric gets dangerous real fast. There's no context in which Wicked is used in a positive connotation in the Bible. Exactly. You've already painted them with a full brush stroke. You've taken their humanity away. And what do we do to people when we take their humanity away? What was it real easy to do in the 1930s?
Dehumanize.
And when they die, nobody speaks. When they're killed, nobody speaks.
Plenty of cisgender straight children in their classrooms while they're just trying to learn. And where many of them pray.
Right?
Many of them pray there. I had many students who prayed in class.
And it's not even praying for what I think a lot of the Christian population is praying for. These kids are praying just to live.
Right.
They don't want to be bullied. They don't want to be attacked. They don't want to have to worry about being pulled over in a car or going to go get a bank loan or being their governor or their legislature rolling back their pronouns so they have to go change their IDs and the birth certificates and start the whole process over. Right. You are dehumanizing people that you deem don't deserve compassion. And as politicians, our political crowd are supposed to represent us all. It's kind of, we know that there's divisiveness. I'm not going to go into who and how, but we know that there was a former president in office who really felt like he stood for one part of the population. And the current president really tries to go out of his way to say that we are united all as one, regardless of whether you voted for him or not. He still cares about you. And that, honestly, guys, is what a leader of a country does. They lead everybody. They don't just lead the part that they like. They lead everybody. And we have, in the U.S., we are very rapidly running from that. And we have got to go back to that. We can't do anything if we don't do this together. We have got to be able to communicate. we've got to be able to talk to one another so that when you decide that, oh, we're doing trans surgeries on like 4-year-olds, we can sit down with you and say, guys, look, that really isn't
That
happening.
isn't
And here's A, B, C, D, E, F, G of how it's not happening.
right.
And how you're listening to words of people who have no basis, no evidence to prove what they're saying.
Right.
Like, please, can we find some common ground and decency? Because I thought that was what, as human beings, we were supposed to be moving toward, to be more compassionate, to be freedom. What is the word freedom in this country? Because it seems like right now freedom is for some and not for all.
Well, that's how it's always been. This isn't new.
It is. The ERA hasn't been passed.
Yeah.
It's been 40, 50 years. Over 37 states have signed on. We haven't passed the ERA for equal rights for women. That's the reason why we have arguments right now on women's bodies, on women's birth control, on women's reproductive care. If the ERA was in place, guys, you wouldn't have that discussion because we get equal rights. And now, oh, yes, AP, John Baptiste freedom. Yes. That's what we want to see. That's not what currently happens.
And I've said, we've talked about this on here before. As parents of, transgender people, we're very willing to come to the table with, some facts, some evidence, and in good faith. And we're very willing to talk about, the fears that we know people have with, oh my gosh, like they're out there just pumping young children full of hormones and surgeries. We're very willing to come to the table and talk about that. We're very willing to say, hey, like, I agree with you in the grand, like in only the most dire circumstances, should you be doing anything like that? But generally that's not what happens with young people. They generally start with some social transition, some change in pronouns, maybe a different haircut, maybe some makeup or other things like that. That's what's happening. But as they take that step into adulthood, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to have that same body autonomy that I have. If I want to go do something with my body, get a surgery, take something off, add something. I have a girlfriend who just got a whole mommy makeover and nobody bats an eyelash. Or in my case,
right.
I took hormone blockers because I was overproducing androgens. Nobody bats an eyelash at that. My daughter is allowed to go get on birth control right now, and nobody would bat an eyelash, even though that's hormones and they're bad for her. They're not
right.
good for her.
No, like I had like serious menstruation problems. And so by the time I was 12, I was on birth control. We had no problem doing that. I had a friend of mine in 1992 who was 16 and had a breast implant on one side because she had fallen into a bathtub of scalding hot water when she was like a toddler, and it had damaged the tissue on one side. And so her parents, when she turned 16, said, you can have a car, but like a really cheap car, or we can help you even your top out if you want, if you choose. And she chose to have her chest evened out. Now, nobody argues or bats an eyelash about that.
Which is gender affirming care. It affirms her feeling of femininity. It affirms her gender.
Chins, nose jobs. Like, how many teenagers who are very insecure about how they look beg their parents to go do one of these surgeries and get it done, or multiple of these surgeries and get it done. And nobody's out there saying, okay, all kids under the age of 18 can't have any gender affirming care. No, you're targeting one population, right. A population that every scientist, every doctor within that population has said repeatedly, it rarely happens. And if it does, it's typically because there is really some kind of physical complication that is being created, whether it be like an intersex and now suddenly there are urinary problems or whatever. Like, you're trying to pick something structural that is now having issues. It's not because you're doing gender trans care. Like, we don't swap parts at 4 years old. It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. It's not happening. And anywhere you're hearing that, you're getting some really misleading information. Amber and I work with lots and lots and lots of parents of trans people. We work and talk with and listen to trans voices. This just isn't a thing that's happening. And for anyone to get outraged and say, well, it is, damn it, shake my fist. It's just not. And you're perpetuating.
I mean, if you're talking about like the 2 or 3 people that go around the US and the UK and say, oh, this happened to me and I'm detransitioning. Right. If you're talking about one of those same people that are being paid by those parties
right.
to keep saying that, and we know, like, if you go do scientific-based research, you will find the studies that come out and implicitly say that gender-affirming care is the way to go. It's what every medical association supports. When Congress tried to go against this, they came out even, the American Association of Pediatrics came out even stronger with a stronger worded statement along with resources published to say, yes, this is established care. It's evidence-based care.
So where do you think the alignment is then with, this push? It felt pretty reactive to me also, because I feel like, I always see things from the right saying, well, they're pushing like gender studies and they're pushing these things and they're pushing this diversity in the classrooms. Did it seem to you kind of reactive in that way to suddenly say, well, then we're going to put our Bible in there? Or do you think that there was something else behind it? What do you think?
I think this is a long plan of 40 years. In the making.
It's been ongoing. I mean, they've been trying to put.
I mean, the conservative movement in the early 80s went on this kick about no homosexuality, no intersex relationships, no abortion, they were completely pro, They were completely pro-life, IVF, no birth control. These were things that's what the Republican Party, the GOP, the Conservative Party were trying to push in the 80s. And they started pushing the Bible rhetoric with it at the same time. And it's only gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. If you are for the Republican Party, you will notice that the language this week from a certain former president changed from I completely support this to I don't support this to the Heritage Foundation is building the foundation of what we're going to achieve in office when I get back in, but now saying I have no idea what Project 2025 is. His name is mentioned over 300 times. His name or his administration is listed over 300 times in this document. He's praised them repeatedly. He backed away from it because he realized that he was pushing too far of his Republican base away who didn't believe in full no rights to abortion. Because the damage is coming across this country right now is evident. The number of deaths, the number of deaths in Texas rose infant mortality rates, right? That the abortion ban they created was going to fix. Their infant mortality rate went up in 1 year, 23%.
Wow.
And the reason is mostly related to congenital birth defects that had they been picked up early on, the fetus would have been terminated so that the family nor the fetus would have been put through that trauma. Right. But because of Texas's ban, they all had to go through that. Now, exactly how is that saving life? How is that caring for life?
It's not. And can you imagine, now you've got to do a funeral, a burial, and not to mention just the absolute heartbreak and trauma.
Right. I mean, it's a miscarriage at any point is always difficult. Yeah. It's always difficult, but this makes it 10 times more difficult. And I think that, again, this goes back to religion. It's these states that are really trying to, and unfortunately, it's the red states, and it typically starts it seems like right now in Texas or in Florida, and then the other red states, as soon as one passes it, go, oh, me next.
Yeah.
So we're just all seeing it at different levels, and it just keeps moving in a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And guys,
and you have
this is why we talk about it.
You're causing the suffering of living, breathing people who a lot of people who want their pregnancies, but aren't able to carry them to term for whatever reason or have that going on.
I mean, it prevents them from being able to. I mean, if
Yeah.
it's bad enough, they could lose their fertility, and then you've lost the ability to bring life into the world at all.
And how many women have already stepped up and said, I sat in a parking lot. I was just saying this earlier, that sit in parking lots of hospitals bleeding out, waiting for care, and no doctor wants to touch them
because they're not critical enough.
They're not critical enough. Like, how critical do you have to be? How much life does a living, breathing human person have to leave? Or how many organs does a living, breathing human person have to lose in order to be able to have the care that they need so that they can go on to have more children one day?
EMTALA was based on the fact that emergency rooms were turning away people without stabilizing them back in the 80s. Because of some of Reagan's administration's policies that were put in place. And so very quickly, the backlash of that was they created EMTALA, which said that if you came into an emergency room, you had to be stabilized before being sent out of the emergency room, or you had to be sent to another facility for stabilizing care. You couldn't just throw them out in the street. And EMTALA, quite frankly, the Biden administration said that was supposed to cover women and their reproductive care. So if you came in with a miscarriage, you could get treated. And we still are having issues with that being carried out because states don't know what they can do. Doctors don't know what they can do. Do you know there's a shortage in OBGYNs? Do you know why there's a shortage in OBGYNs? Because they don't want to be questioned on what their license is and whether or not they can save someone's life. So who's going to deliver the babies? If we don't have OBGYNs, and you cut off birth control, who is going to take care of all the babies in all the healthcare deserts in every red state in this freaking country? Anybody got a clue?
Deserts
we do. We have them here. We have them here in North Carolina. I mean, the South is a healthcare desert.
Mm-hmm.
On purpose. On purpose, guys. You should really research who you're voting for. You need to research what policies they are trying to push through, what they support. Know your politicians. Right now, the biggest thing you could do is vote. And this year is pivotal, guys. And that's not me being a hypochondriac. That's not me like, ooh, end of the world.
Right.
It just means that what could come into office could really alter what we consider our country right now. And after the last few years, it's already altered enough in my lifetime that I don't recognize it for my children. Between Roe versus Wade and the Chevron doctrine, I don't recognize where we're at. And I really want to preserve democracy, that we all still have the ability to use our voices. And this election could change that for all of us.
Mark Henry on TikTok here brought up, it's never been about babies. It's about control. Another part of Project 2025 I was reading about was the end to no-fault divorce.
Yep.
Why would we end no-fault divorce? Why in the world would we make divorce more difficult when that hurts vulnerable people, especially children? People should be able to get a divorce whenever they want one. If you're not happy being married, why should you not be able to get divorced? Why would we put barriers to the ability to go determine your own destiny and live your own life? There's no freedom in that. And furthermore, it's just about control, and it's control in one way or another. And I just don't understand wanting to control people in such a way to make them live a life that they just don't want, that they don't want to live, that's not right for them. When you do that, people start making really drastic and wild decisions in their life, and they start taking really drastic measures and doing really drastic things. And it's just unnecessary.
I was trying to remember, I was trying to see if I had saved it on my phone, and I don't know if I did, but it was kind of talking about, and my brain is going to slip now, no-fault divorce. I think 2 women friends I've got might be here since their partners were abusive.
Absolutely.
That might be me.
Right.
In the 70s, when this law was created, when no fault divorce was put in place, suicides for women dropped 8 to 16% across the nation. The number of domestic violence deaths dropped by 29%.
That's significant.
That's huge.
Significant.
And that's the whole reason why we put it in place, was so that women who were trapped in these marriages could get out. And now we literally, before Project 25, because honestly, I didn't know Project 2025 had it in there. I heard from a Midwestern representative who had put into policy last week, or presented policy, about how he wanted to end no-fault divorce across the country.
And
for this exact.
Why?
Wisconsin this week, one of the senators there said that he wanted to roll us back to the 1960s, guys, in his white hair. This is not the 1960s.
Right.
It's 2024, and it's time to catch up a little. Progress. That's what our nation actually was founded on, was to progress and to grow.
To grow, to change, to be better than it was. And why go back there? Why would we go back in that direction?
I'm not.
Thank
you didn't realize that? Oh, yeah. No. AP is huge. It's huge. Oh, Q's Congress. Yes. AP, yes. Congress from this past weekend. Yes. Very much so. We're getting pretty political and lyrical lights too. For the same reasons. I don't try and go out here and just about politics, but I do want you guys to understand that who you're voting for, what you're voting for, and who it affects.
All this.
It affects all of us.
Political. I wish it was as easy as we're talking about, a difference in how we think we should run the economy, but we're not anymore. We're talking about a difference in how we should value human rights.
Freedom.
And I don't know how to make that non-political.
Right. Yeah. And yesterday's events, yeah, I just, that kind of threw everything up in the air, and now I'm really kind of like, whoo. So yes, next week is definitely going to be about Title IX in the education. It's going to be about SCOTUS's latest rulings and how that impacts the LGBT community, how one of their particular recent decisions has already been used as evidence in several federal judiciary courts. And again, those ripples, guys, if you ever look at my page, I have this thing about ripples turn into waves, turn to a tsunami. We're looking at the little ripples right now.
Yeah.
If we think we've seen waves, we haven't.
No.
And if we're not prepared, we're going to be hit with a tsunami, and it's not of love. It's the exact opposite. I think you are entitled to believe what you want to believe.
100%.
I don't think it's okay for you to push your beliefs onto other people. I don't expect people to adopt how I feel about my kid. I do want you to understand that my trans son, though, has every right to live and be as everybody else on this planet. And that no matter what your opinion is, it doesn't change the fact, his fact, Jenny's son's fact of who they are, because we each get self-determination. That's what this is, self-determination.
And for people everybody has the right to be fully autonomous.
Yep.
Everyone should have the right to decide what happens to their own body. Everyone should have the right to decide how their destiny is going to turn out. And there's always going to be consequences for that too. If someone decides that they want to do X, Y, Z, and there are negative repercussions for that, and they know it and they do that anyway, then they deal with the negative repercussions of that. Everyone has the right to make mistakes. Everyone has the right to change their mind. Everyone has the right to grow and learn and get better. And everyone has the right to just not care about some shit sometimes. We have the right to, protect our mental health, decide how we feel about anything.
Yep.
Where those rights end is when they touch another. I have the right not to care about something, but if I don't care that, my children aren't eating, my rights are now gone. I have now stepped on their right to eat,
Right.
to exist, to have
Right.
what I'm supposed to supply to them as a parent. It is fine to have all the opinions we want and have all the beliefs we want. But once those step on others, we've crossed into their rights.
Right.
And
I think that's just as kind of a modicum of respect that I feel like we've just lost in this country, that I do feel like growing up we did have, was that I respected that you felt the way you did, you respected that I felt this way, and we could sit down at the same table with opposite opinions and have a discussion about those things, and a very casual conversation, like it didn't get heated.
And I hear you, but it's just a little, like, again, we're talking about, somebody's human rights. It's just,
no, I'm with you. Like, now I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of like, okay, well, you can say that as long as it doesn't impact somebody's rights.
Right. We can disagree,
and you can still believe it. You can still believe it. I just don't think there's a reason that people need to spew the hate and the rhetoric. And that is really the difference now, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years, I would say, than from graduating high school and those first few years out, is that the climate of our country has moved to where everybody feels like they can say what they want to say, as AP said earlier, however they want to say it, whenever they want to say it. No matter how derogatory, no matter how abusive, no matter how discriminatory, no matter how hateful it is. And that's not what our goal here as a nation was. This experiment we call democracy. That's not democracy. It's screaming in each other's faces. And we've got to kind of come back down to this, I don't know, commonality. I don't even know how to describe it anymore, because AP, we've lost that. Our wish of our age were at the level of the economy infrastructure zoning, but the issues have gotten bigger.
I would love to argue about taxes.
Right. Like, it has shifted. It has shifted dramatically. You're right, AP. But the only way that we can shift it back is to honestly stand up to it and keep talking about it. That's why we're here. My kid there's nothing wrong with my kid.
Yeah, nothing. And there's nothing wrong with you as a parent that loves and supports your child.
Right. And if y'all are out there and you feel like people are pushing back against you, family members, community, spouses.
Yeah.
I implore you to keep sticking up for your kid. Your offspring comes first.
Speak up and speak out. They start to get real uncomfortable when they know people will say things around me because they don't know. And all I come back with is, hey, you know what? Like, my kid is trans. Can you not? And they shut up real quick because people don't really want to be, I don't know, they don't want to be called out. They don't really want to be hateful. I think they think they're being funny or making a point, or they think they know something. I don't know. But once people know that talk isn't welcome around you, they'll keep it away from you. And they might start minding what they say in front of other people because they've been called out, because don't be afraid to embarrass somebody.
Right.
I'm not,
And I don't even think it's embarrassing somebody. I think it's just kind of calling back to, hey, could you have some humanity for somebody else? And we have lost that. We have moved from this, what I thought was a collective community society growing up, to where I feel like now everybody is individual. It's only you. Me. I don't have to worry about anybody else outside my box.
Right.
Yes, you do.
Yes,
What you do and what you say affects others greatly. And that's all we're asking, is that people kind of start thinking about, what are you saying? And when you say it, where did you get it from?
Right.
Do you know what you're saying is true? Or are you just throwing out some politician's angry Twitter point that they've decided to flash across the screen? And you get to go scream and yell it. Because that's harassment. It's bullying. That's what our politics have become. AP, Lord of the Flies. Yes, that is where we're at.
That is where we're at. 1984. Like,
Yeah.
we are looking at some pretty dystopian times ahead if we don't course correct. So where did you get it from? That's a good question.
It is. It is. I mean, like, APA do call people out when they say that.
A lot of
When they
people
say, oh, a
don't.
5-year-old's having surgery. I'm like, where'd you hear it?
Right.
Where'd you get that from?
Who said
Do you
that?
know someone? Because if
Right.
it's a rumor, I'm sorry, I don't go for that. I need you to give me the facts. And if you can't hand me facts, we're not even going to sit down and have a conversation because you've come to a fact-filled conversation with rhetoric.
I love it.
I'm just not having it. I'll be like, all right, go get your info, go get your facts. I want you list them out. My resources, I've started giving y'all resources because I'm not trying, I don't want you to think that I'm just coming in here and throwing opinions at you. I want you to know that I got this from somewhere.
My girl cites her sources.
Sorry.
Love it.
I was going to do research, nursing research, and didn't go that route, but I still have my research.
Well, my
And when I
friends
go
and
into policy,
here
oops.
on TikTok, I'll stay here chatting with Amber.
Right.
Bye, y'all, and I still don't care. Bye.
All right, guys, we love you. We'll see you next week. I'm going to close us out, and we will, like I said, join us next week where we've got some more hot topics coming up. Bye.